Good morning all. How are we today? Great. So you've all been asked to sit down, but it's not very long. I'm going to ask everybody to please stand up. And I'm going to ask everybody this question. You can sit down if you've heard of generative AI. Who's heard of generative AI? Please sit down. Okay? All right. Who's heard of ChatGPT? You can sit down. Okay, just for the record, they are the same thing. Right, just so we know what we're talking about. Now, today I'm going to talk a little bit about generative AI, and I'm going to give a little bit of a technical update to start with so that we know what we're talking about, and about the difference between AI, generative AI, and how it applies to the supply chain. So when we look at generative AI, we think, well, what's different compared to traditional AI? So let's understand traditional AI a little bit. Now, when we think about traditional AI, artificial intelligence, it is specifically programmed code, right, or algorithms that allow us to perform specific tasks. When the Undersecretary was talking about security, for example, you can have AI that will help identify somebody walking around in an area that they're not supposed to be, right? So they do very specific tasks. And these tasks can be really complex or they can be really simple. And the idea with generative AI is that it looks a little bit like human intelligence, but it's applied to very specific areas. Now, when we talk about generative AI, you can see here that it's just one part of the overall AI. But it's become really interesting because of things like ChatGPT, right? So when we look at generative AI, so that you understand what it is, it's a part of AI in computer science that is really specialized in creating new content. So who's had a conversation with generative AI? Hand up. With ChatGPT. Yeah? And when it talks back to you, it talks like a person, right? And so every time we talk, we have a conversation, we're actually making new content. The words that we speak today are different to the words that we spoke 5 minutes ago, yesterday, a week ago. And so ChatGPT and generative AI is able to do this like a human, hence why it's part of artificial intelligence. But it's not just about text. It can do audio, it can do photos, it can do videos. And this is one of the exciting things about it that's got everybody's attention. And we look at these videos, or these photos, right? These are all generated by generative AI, right? So generative models, right? The generative models that form the basis of ChatGPT, Bard, and other generative AI tools allow machines to learn from data and then create this new original content. And this is from the CTO of Facebook, this quote. And this is revolutionizing what we think about music, about what we think about text, about how we write things, about the images that we put up. You can see here that this is becoming an exciting field that is capturing our imagination. And this is why we're hearing about it so much. You can see all these images generated by generative AI, right? Now, the potential for this is significant in the supply chain industry, but I thought I'd have a little bit of fun with it, right? So there's a generative AI image generator called Midjourney. And with Midjourney, I got on there and I said, give me a photo of a realistic supply chain manager in his natural environment. Right? So that's why we've got all this lovely nature, right? All this beautiful nature, because he's in his natural environment, right? But then it got a little bit weird. If you can see this last image here, all right? How many legs does he have? 3, yeah. So it's creating new content, but not necessarily in the way that we want. Okay, so there are some limitations to it at the moment, but we can see it's quite amazing in that how it can generate this new content, and we can be very creative about it and put things together. But why is this a big deal to the supply chain industry? You know, we can chat, we can create new images, have a bit of fun, and it's very exciting and very interesting. But what does it mean to us? All right, and there are 4 main areas that it's actually allowing the future of artificial intelligence or the future of AI to move forward, right? The first thing is that it inspires us. It not only inspires us, it inspires potentially new employees. So if we're able to embrace technology like this, we all of a sudden find ourselves much more appealing to future generations, to younger employees coming in. It is also inspiring us in terms of being able to lift jobs. So instead of people being involved so much in the monotony and the repetitive day-to-day nature of the job, they're able to focus a little bit more on more creative aspects, right? It allows jobs to be enhanced. And with that, organizations are able to improve the customer experience. So we can then have the bot talk to customers, either online, and make them accessible 24 hours a day, right? Or we can have the bot refer to other parts of organizational information and retrieve information. We can have it improve the customer experience. Imagine talking to a bot and saying, how many days of leave do I have? Sorry, the employee experience. How many days of leave do I have left for the year? Instead of having to log on to the HR system, navigate through, right? Or say, what's the policy for using devices at home? Or even for IT support. Can you tell me how I can connect here? Or I have a problem here, can you tell me how to fix it? So there's a lot of potential in how it's going to enhance how we do work. It also allows for a lot of personalization. So this is going to happen from customer and employee experiences. So it'll refer to us by our names. So instead of saying, you know, please enter your name here, you enter it in, and then it'll be able to customize, and based on past interactions, it will draw on that and say, do you remember the last time you did this? Here is another way forward. It will also allow for companies to customize their product offerings. So if you are a manufacturer and you have an employee logging on, a customer logging on, if you think about companies like Adidas and Nike, right, who have customization of sneakers, right? You can select the different colors. What if it knew you and said, based on your choices that you've bought so far, here are 5 designs that we recommend that you would like, and we can manufacture them just for you, right? So these are all examples of how it's going to personalize how we deal with companies. And it's going to allow for innovation. And the reason that is because in some cases we're going to see a lot of these jobs elevate, right? Being able to take customer support, the basic queries, right? It's going to take those away and allow those that are answering phones or those that are dealing with customer service to perhaps focus on maybe the more complex queries. And then from there, they're not necessarily having to deal with more monotonous work, so they're able to think about the job that they're doing and come up with innovations themselves, rather than having to do it themselves and get caught in the weeds every day. So there's tremendous opportunity in this. And we're not the only ones that are saying so. At IDC, we do market research that looks at how technology is applied for different industries. We talk to a lot of vendors. And we have never seen adoption of generative AI like, any adoption of technologies like we've seen with generative AI. In the last quarter, we have seen more roadmaps come out with this technology than anything else, like blockchain, mobile devices. They took longer cycles to be implemented and adopted. However, generative AI has captured the imagination not just of companies, but also the technology providers. Now just listen to this for a sec.
Hello. Hey, Jane. Yeah, who's it? Hey, Jane. How's your day going? You're going pretty good, my man. How about yourself? You said you're Tesla, right? Our company? Yeah, that's right. any trouble or questions while customers are on our website? No, we're just kind of shopping around and taking a look. That makes sense. Sometimes we're just exploring our options. I totally respect. Can I ask you why you're looking into this? Yeah, I mean, I've had my car for way too long now, so kind of taking a look at options. I have a lot of friends who just absolutely rave about Tesla. Me myself, I'm actually a big fan of Elon Musk. So I figured I might as well take a look and kind of explore my options there and see what you guys have available. That's a smart approach, James. It's always good to explore your options. Out of curiosity, what do you currently drive? Yeah, I drive an old Ford Fusion, my man. Nice, Ford Fusion. Why are you looking to switch things up and consider a Tesla? Yeah, I had that car since literally set up my first job years back. And it's just time for a change. It's like, not super reliable anymore. And time for an upgrade. I live in the city now, and I want to get a new apartment. I just want to get a new car at the same time. Totally get that, James. Moving to a new apartment is a great opportunity to make some fresh changes. Are you looking at purchasing any other cars at the moment? Or are you right?
So if you were on the other end of this call, right, if you were actually receiving this call, would you know it was a bot? Would you know it was artificial intelligence? Because those responses are actually put together on the fly. They're created as they're speaking. You don't know how the customer is going to respond, right? So these are put together and you can hear the slight pause, but on the phone you might think that that's just a connection issue, right? So these days we're starting to see that generative AI can actually fulfill roles like this, which is kind of interesting. Now, as we bring this into a supply chain context, the other thing that generative AI can do is deal with large unstructured data sets. Now, we can do this with AI, but it's a little bit more complicated. And it makes it a little bit more approachable, so organisations are looking at it more, and it's increasing our willingness to look at this as a new technology. It can do things like help us extract data from things like quality reports, from customer feedback, from bills of lading, tender documents, and make sense of those. And then we can feed those back into other programs that are going to allow us to do things like the support call we just saw, or being able to provide updates on inventory statuses, being able to make decisions based on the feedback that we're getting and influence design decisions for our products. Now, IDC, the thing with IDC is we're International Data Corporation, so that data is a big part of what we do. And we actually survey a lot of organisations. In this case, we surveyed manufacturing, retail and wholesale, and logistics and transport organisations. And we said, well, how are you using AI and are you going to use it? And 75% said that they're currently in the process of exploring how to use AI or investing in it. And this is as of June, so it's a fairly recent number. Now, as we look at how they're going to use it, the key areas of application are things like knowledge management, so being able to extract all the knowledge from things like the unstructured documents, the quality reports, the tender documents, and being able to have a repository that's able to interpret it and manage it. Being able to generate code, so for IT departments in your organisations, and also for design, right? How are we actually designing products and services and processes? So where can organisations use generative AI in the supply chain? So I've got a few use cases here. One I talked about is being able to generate documents, right? So imagine, you have a quality report that you have to put together, and a lot of times you have to manually go through and assess the reports, pull out the text. Imagine you could have this done by generative AI. How long is the response time from ChatGPT? How long does ChatGPT take to put some text together in responding to you? Less than a minute? Less than 30 seconds? Yeah? Imagine being able to put these sort of reports together in that sort of time, or at least be in a position where you're just reviewing the text instead of having to create it from scratch, right? And this is the sort of applications that we're starting to talk about. where we're able to have the synthesis of that data and pull that in and be able to generate documents, right? Being able to put together compliance reports, being able to put together the sustainability reports, right? All of these sort of things are areas where this could be applied. All right, now we can think about transportation and logistics. Now we heard the customer service call, like that's a phone call, but how about if we had a chatbot and we wanted to find out when the order is going to come in, or what's the status of an order, right? And have a chatbot that says, okay, can you tell me what's going to happen with this order? I found a match for the sort of order that you're looking for. Here's a quote, right? Or if you're tracking an order, can you look up this order number and tell me when the production of it is going to finish? Or can you tell me when this order is scheduled to arrive? Or what sort of documentation is missing for this order, right? All of these sort of correspondence and communication can now be interpreted and put together with generative AI models. Now, the last example I'll talk about is in automating and streamlining order processing. Now, we've put these use cases in buckets, but they could be used in multiple areas of organisations. In this case, we're looking at Aviation Services, and we have a use case here where an organisation is taking the ability to absorb a whole lot of unstructured data. So things like emails. Do any of you use things like Teams or Slack, right, for messaging? Yeah? Yeah, so you could pull together the data from that, being able to interpret that. Being able to pull in the data from your ERP or your order management systems, and then being able to compile that. And you're talking about thousands. In this case, it was thousands of customers' orders a year, right? Being able to automatically pull together the information of that, understand or synthesize it, and being able to respond to customers with feedback in minutes instead of hours, all right? Requiring less human interaction, so your cost of labour goes down. But more importantly, being more accurate. Right? In some markets, cost of labour may not be a consideration, like here, but accuracy of information and being able to synthesize that is really important. So response time, being able to do it really quickly, right? Removing manual processes, so they're being able to have quicker and more accurate information. And then also being able to multiply the capacity that an organisation can take. Instead of employing more labour, now you've got generative AI, you can actually expand much faster, right? So these are some of the areas that we're actually seeing this being adopted. However, it's not all golden. There are a lot of challenges and limitations with artificial intelligence and generative AI at the moment, but they are being addressed and they are being improved. The first one is around trust, right? Trusting the computer, having the workers trust the information that they're getting from AI, right? And this is going to take time. Usually what we will see is organisations working together with the artificial intelligence, testing it to see if it matches the knowledge that the workers have. And if it actually is helping them get responses faster and making them look more like an expert, we usually find that trust comes on board pretty quickly. There are also concerns about job losses. However, what we're finding, and Singapore, the Singapore government recently put out a big article about what jobs are being created in the logistics sector. And we're actually finding more jobs are being created around the capabilities that are required to understand these technologies than are being lost. And as organisations are migrating to these technologies, we're finding that there are actually a greater number of job opportunities. There are those that have the ability to deal with data or are willing to engage with these sort of systems. Actually finding they have a lot more opportunities. Control versus creativity. Now this is an interesting one. A lot of times we say, all right, we want a lot of control over the AI. We want to control what information goes into that. However, if we do too much control, we could end up with something like what's on the left, right? The creativity goes down, yeah? But we do get something that vaguely resembles a horse, right? But if we give the system more data, we're able to give it more access to things like the internet, etc., then we're able to increase or enhance the creativity, right? And we have this with the jobs, in the scopes of the jobs that we're talking about. So organisations will need to find that balance between control and creativity. When it comes to computational resources and efficiency, right, it does take a lot of computing power. And at the moment, those that are doing generative AI are generally using cloud as a way to do this. And I think I've got a colleague who'll be talking a little bit about cloud later. Cloud computing does allow for the sort of resources that are required in order to do this. If you do this inside your organisation, the investment can be quite substantial, and the impact on sustainability can also be large because there's a lot of energy utilisation that's required in order to make this happen. I'm sure there will be a conversation about that later in the sustainability panel, but it is certainly something to consider when looking at how we're actually adopting generative AI and making sure that we're doing so responsibly, so it's not incurring additional cost from energy, as well as from a sustainability perspective. Here we have a statement saying that researchers estimated that creating GPT-3, which is one of the models that is used for ChatGPT, which has 175 billion parameters, so bits of data that come into it, actually consumed 1,287 megawatts of electricity, which is the equivalent of 123 gasoline-powered cars. All right, so it is quite substantial in how much energy it consumes, and it is a consideration that we have to think about. Now, generative AI models sometimes struggle with new or challenging situations, and sometimes with math. Right? We've seen some great examples out on the internet of how it has messed up a calculation. All right, that's because it tends to create new content. Right? It's very good. We need to understand what it's used for. However, we are getting model training that is bringing that back in line so you can trust the calculations it makes. But at the same time, we need to recognise the strengths. So it's something that the industry is working on, but it also requires intensive data and commitment from companies like yours to make sure that it's being trained in a way that's going to make the responses accurate and trustworthy. What's happening here? All right. There are ethical and legal concerns. So organisations do have to think about how they're training their data. They also think about whether their data is being used to train competitor products. So for example, if you go onto ChatGPT and you put all your company information on that, it's going to take that information inside and use that and train on that and pass that information to other users. So we need to think about, what are the ethical considerations of that? What are the legal considerations? So you should not be sharing any company IP onto ChatGPT or any other public generative AI model. So when you build your own, though, then you need to think about what are the considerations for that. There are models out there that are bringing this in, and this is one example, right? They are best-in-class data retention, so they keep the data inside just your model for your use, and they don't train the model on the data, so it's not being exposed to some of your competitors, right? So these are considerations that you have to consider. Another one is with data quality. You need high quality data in order to train this. So the way that the generative AI puts together its responses is by ingesting a whole lot of data and then responding based on that. So you have to think about the quality of the data that you're putting into it and making sure that it doesn't have biased data. All right. So for example, people have bias, right? We all have biases, and so does AI. This is actually an average image, right? So there was Bloomberg did a test and said, what are the average images of people based on their jobs, right? So this guy is a computer engineer. This lady is a cleaner, and you can see that it's starting to come up with different face shapes, racial profiles, based on who they perceive as in that job. And so this is because of the data sets that are going into it, we can actually see the biases inherent in that data, right? So we have to think about this. Are we actually training our AI to be biased, right? Or are we introducing things that allow it to have less bias and therefore present us with the best option instead of a biased option for our business? So what does this mean for us as leaders, right? People in the room. It means that we need to think from process execution to process augmentation. When we design jobs, right, how are we going to design jobs so that we can actually have some of that work done by things like generative AI and other tools, and then have the people that are working on it supervise the machines, right? We need to be able to manage the innovation, because if they're supervising the process instead of doing the process, they're going to be able to start seeing faults in the process, and they might start innovating and having ideas about how to improve that. How are you as a manager going to incorporate that? How are you going to evaluate the data that comes out of it if you think that some of the data might not be trustworthy? What is going to be the source of truth for your data, and how are you going to manage that? In all of this, we're talking about job management, job redesign, change management, bringing this into the organisation. It's not easy, and it's probably something we'll be talking about in the panel next. How are you going to keep abreast of new technologies that are coming? Because generative AI is just the beginning. Over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see some extraordinary developments in this space. And being able to keep your eye on that and being aware of what's happening in that compared to what you're doing now is going to be extremely important in order to remain competitive. This will then force us to think about how we increase our decision quality using the data and the tools that are available out there, because there are two things to consider. One, your existing competitors. If you're not looking at it, they probably are. And the next thing is, if you have new entrants into the market that are setting up companies today, they will do it very differently to the way that was done 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you're going to be competing directly with that. So thinking about how you're going to compete and be able to stay ahead of that sort of competition is going to be quite important. And then cultivate humanity and high-touch relationships. There's a science fiction reference that I often refer to, and it's about living in the stars, and it's a future where everything is automated and run by computer robots. And one of the things that's in this is that the organisations that are able to charge more are the ones that are able to have that human touch, that human experience. And I think this is where we're going in the future, is we're going to be able to rely on the computers for the process, and then it's going to be us that's going to bring the relationship aspect to the companies that's going to actually matter to our customers. So in terms of how we move forward, you'll need to think about how to align a strategy and develop your roadmap. You need to do this in line with what your company is wanting you to do. When you do that, you'll need to identify the use cases. So for example, is it in automating documentation? Is it in putting together a customer chatbot? Is that going to help you? And then you need to be able to identify that and scale that across your business. You need to think about the data and the network infrastructure that's going to support that. And then integrate that with your existing systems. So you are able to bring in your ERP, your order management, connect it to an Excel spreadsheet if that's what you have. Being able to put it together with your chatbots, your Slacks, all of these communication tools so that you can get that outcome. And then invest in the new talent with existing and new staff. Being able to bring these skills on board, because this is going to excite them. So I'd like to end with a quote that says, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday's logic." Now, as we look forward as supply chain professionals, you're going to learn a lot today, not just like we heard about security this morning and thinking about cyber defense, not just physical defense. When you're thinking about generative AI and not just computer systems, right? You need to have that logic moving forward, because if you don't, your competitors will. What you do with it, the choice is yours.